Hi, just wanted to do a quick update on the Westminster project, just to give you a bit more of an idea of where I want to go with it and where I did plan on going with it in the past. The plan still is to do a nut and bolt restoration on the car. I did consider in the past, doing a customization on the car, running a larger engine like an American V8, something like that. I've also considered sort of, I guess what you call a sleeper, and running a similar engine to what it has, like a straight six engine, but out of a 280Z. The only issue with trying to do the project like that is it becomes very, very expensive and way out of my range. So I had to consider what power could I get out of the engine that the car currently has. So I just thought I'd just show some parts that I'm going to fit onto the engine that it has to get more power. I'll just move you around. There we go. Right. There we are. Right. So, more importantly that you see the cylinder head and not my ugly mug. Right, so this is the cylinder head from the Austin Westminster. It's what it came off the production line with. Performance wise, they got around 110 bhp out of the engines with this cylinder head, which is obviously adequate at the time to push the car along at 75, 80 miles an hour, which is pretty good considering how heavy the car was or is. But performance-wise, you're a little bit limited, or I'm a little bit limited. There's not a great deal I can do with this cylinder head. They call this cylinder head the gallery cylinder head, as far as I know, and the reason they call it that is because this section here, this raised channel, this is the intake manifold, and it's actually part of the cylinder head. There is no separate aluminium manifold like on a modern engine, or plastic even these days. And with that, I'm governed by these two ports here, which means I can only have two carburetors. Now, I don't intend running any more than two carburetors on my modified engine, but I would be governed by this. And I'd also be governed by the size, I think, by the size of carburetors I could actually use as well. Also, I've actually not seen a cylinder head design like this before. There may be others out there, but it's odd to me that they designed it so the head bolts actually go right through the intake manifold. And I don't have one to show you, but the head bolts at the point of where they're inside the intake manifold, they've actually been machined, they've actually been narrowed down to try and reduce the restriction that they would cause if they were their normal thickness. So I'm not saying that the cylinder head doesn't work. Obviously it was adequate for what it needed to do. The performance, it's kind of limited. There's not a lot else it can really do. I don't think you'd get a great deal out of it. The carburetors it ran with these, and I'll just make sure you can see those in the camera. These are SU HS4s. These have the 1.5-inch throat, and there'll be two of these, one either side, so that one probably sat there, I think. And there would have been a rubber block between the head and the carburetor. So those are carburetors that I would be stuck with if I decided to keep the cylinder head. So what I've decided to do, I'm just going to kicking you all over the place, is run a different cylinder head. Now, the only car at the time that shared this same engine that was a performance car was an Austin-Healey 3000. And Austin-Healey did use this cylinder head in the sort of beginning of the Austin-Healey range. They did actually use this same cylinder head, so they must have thought, well, we can't get any more horsepower out of this engine. It is a sports car. Well, we need to do something about it. And obviously, rallying was coming along, and everyone was getting very, very competitive. So what they did, I've got it here, and these are really, really heavy because they're cast iron. They made this cylinder head. I'll just make sure you can see that properly. Yeah, let's move you a little bit. There we go. So, right. So they had this cylinder head. As far as I know, I think they call this a BJ8 cylinder head. and as you can see, it's a little bit different. There's this ported face here. This is where the intake manifold will go, and obviously the exhaust manifold. That goes to these ports here and here, and the intake go to these 6, well, 2 and 2 here. So unlike this head, where the manifold, the intake manifold is actually, and it is actually part of it, this cylinder head allows you to have the option of having a separate intake manifold, which means you can choose to run, obviously within the limits of the cylinder head, you could potentially have 6 carburetors, or say 6 carburetors. You could have 3 twin choke Webers, you can have 3 SUs or 2 SUs. I'm going to be using 2 SUs because that's what I can afford to do. And I could just wipe my hand with a rag. I'll show you the intake manifold. I'll just put it on. Place that on there. Right. There is actually there's an issue with this manifold. The stud pattern on this side is very, very bad, and I can't fit the carburetor. At some point, someone's done a very bad repair on that, and they weren't particularly careful when they were running a tap to recut the thread, and it's pissed as a 9-bob note, I guess you could say. It's not very good. So that's our intake. Which I'd like to think is obviously larger and flow better than this one, which obviously allows our fuel air mix to get into the engine quicker. Also we need is the carburetor, which I'll get. And I'll just show it to you. That's the HS6 SU. This has a 1 3/4 throat across there, and this, again with another one, just plug it on there, would sit right next to it. There'll be another one there, obviously. So we have our larger intake manifold, we have our larger carburetor. The other difference between the original head and this head is it also has larger valves as well. I don't have them to show you at the moment, but the intake valve and the exhaust valves are a lot bigger than the ones in this original cylinder head, which means we'll obviously be able to get more fuel air mix in and more exhaust gases out. The other thing is, if you can see it on there, I've noticed that the way this combustion chamber is also made is different. This seems to have sides to it. It's angled and it has actual corners, whereas this doesn't. This is very curved, it's very smooth in comparison. Now I was trying to read up about it, but I know that obviously BMC used this heart-shaped combustion chamber, and I think it's to do with improving the way the mixture comes into the cylinder and the way exhaust gases escape. I'm sure I've read that somewhere, or someone's told me that. So, but there's obviously a difference between this combustion chamber in here and this one, and it seems to be it's a lot more curved, a lot much smoother. It doesn't have corners. The other thing also, combined with using this cylinder head, with this intake and these carburetors, so obviously we've got bigger valves, we're getting more fuel air mix in, we're getting more exhaust gases out, but combined with this I'll be running a Bja Camshaft, which I don't have the specs, but I was reading up on it, and it has a much more lift, it's a much larger lift. The valve obviously opens further, and it has a longer duration, so it means the valves open, and they open obviously sooner and close a lot later. So again, allowing more fuel and air into the engine and getting and expelling more and more, more exhaust gases, which is what we want. Other things combined with that is I'll be running electronic ignition. I have owned old cars in the past, and points they do work, but they can be a pain, and they do, you know, they do either close up or open up, or the condenser fails and the points burn out and you're at the side of the road trying to fix it. So I've done that before, so I'm going to run electronic ignition with this engine. I'll probably run what's known as a dynamometer as well, which will it looks like a dynamo, but it's not. It's actually an alternator. So I get get my sort of 25 to 30% more power to everything I need. I'll probably run a performance coil as well. I'm not sure about the exhaust manifold. The problem is I don't think although it's incredibly expensive, and I personally think overpriced, the Austin-Healey sort of 6-branch manifold, for one thing, won't fit underneath here without having all this machined out, which is not an impossibility. But the other thing is, I don't think it will actually fit under the bonnet of the car either, because the chassis rails would be too close. So it would come out too far, like this, and it would start to hit the inner wings and the chassis rail. It's just too much. Whereas the original type Healey manifolds are quite squat, and they fit into here, and they pretty much they actually sit. The actual manifolds have a flat point on them where the intake actually sits onto. So it is actually part of this. So in a way, that obviously could be improved. I could get more performance if I did use a tubular manifold, but again, it's what's in my price range. Horsepower wise, I think, as far as I know, the Austin-Healey 3000s with the Bja cam and this type of cylinder head, we're getting anywhere between 135 and 150 bhp. The only difference between that and what I have is they were running this manifold. I think was slightly bigger inside because they wanted to run, they ran HD8s, which are the 2-inch version of these. So there's a slight difference between, I think, this manifold and definitely the carburetors they were running. They were a lot bigger. So if I get a 20 horsepower increase, that's better than nothing. It'll make the car get off the line a little bit quicker maybe, and also sound a bit different. And also with these components, when anyone looks under the bonnet, because they're period parts of the same time, it won't look too out of place if you look under the bonnet and see these carburetors, because obviously you would have seen the twin HS4s there. And the only real difference is obviously really is this manifold, because this head has pretty much the same exhaust manifold and it has the same rocker cover. So there wouldn't be you wouldn't really notice it. It would just be this part here that would be the difference. But anyway, that's an update so far. I will be doing an update on the Jaguar project as well. I have had some panels arrive. I've had some door skins, or foreskins as Matt Green likes to call them. I've had some arrive, so just unfortunately I have to go away and work in Ireland for the next sort of 2 weeks, so there's going to be a lack of videos for the next couple of weeks, but not that there's been many to begin with, but the way it is with work, and it's getting the time to get in the garage. So anyway, but I just thought I'd give you an update on the Westminster project and where I'm going with it as far as the engine's concerned. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot.